Peace family, Vie Darling, the Cosmic Queen, and your intergalactic interpreter here for a, I guess, energy reading, cosmic wellness session, if you will. We're going to get the intel on the energy of the vernal equinox, and I'm super excited to share because this has been a really heavy time, a really heavy period, working our way towards this energy. So it feels like a culmination of a lot of really big energy. And before we get into it, I just want to explain what the equinox is. So I'm reading from timeanddate.com, the March Equinox. So there are 2 equinoxes every year, one in March and one in September. In March, the sun crosses the equator from south to north. The March equinox is the moment the sun crosses the celestial equator, an imaginary line in the sky above Earth's equator, from north to south. And a little bit more information and clarity around what the celestial equator is that it is the projection into space of the Earth's equator, an imaginary circle equidistant from the celestial point. So that is a mathematical projection. It's not necessarily real, but you know, that's neither here nor there. It is supposed to be the time when the day is as long as the night and the night is as long as the day, and we are now moving towards ascension into the summer. And actually, we've been in an ascension period since the solstice. The solstice is the lowest point on the wheel. The solstice is the lowest point on the wheel of, I guess you could say, time, the cycles and the seasons. And for me, a lot of what's been coming up is around the Celtic indigenous ancestral traditions, and that is the Celtic wheel of time, and that is something that Wiccans use. So I'm just going to show y'all imagine that that's perfectly equal, obviously. 0 degrees, 180 degrees, 90, 270 degrees. Now this is 360 degrees. It's also 0. So the important thing to understand is that because it is a wheel, and that is what allows it to be infinite, when we get to 0, we also get to 360. I've talked about this before using this example and this image because I think it's super helpful understanding that the balancing point that we are at is the 0/360 mark. And that's what I mean when I say that we are going through the looking glass, because Libra is actually it's a mirror. It's the sacred waters that are so pure that they are able to reflect back to us our reflection perfectly. Of course, if we have distortions in the mirror, in the waters, that's going to stop that from being able to reflect back effectively. And in this case, we're thinking about the subconscious, because when we think about the subconscious, I see the image in my mind. Of this 5% conscious mind, and then the 95% of the subconscious mind. and this is like what is above the water, and this is what is underneath the water. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, the conscious mind. And 95% of the mind is the subconscious mind, which is underneath the water. And when we think about the subconscious mind, esoterically, it is just associated with water. And we're using sidereal astrology, but in tropical astrology, the vernal equinox is the start of Aries season. However, in sidereal astrology, the constellations are not, the signs and their placements are not tied to the ecliptic. They are actually where they are in the sky, in the cosmos. So it's shifted 23 degrees since the implementation of this system 2,000 years ago. And so this is what is used in Vedic astrology as well. And I will note that because the sign Ophiuchus is not countered into this, and because the sign Ophiuchus is not countered into this or factored into it, and the actual size of each of these constellations is not factored into it, there are some discrepancies. That's something that I personally am figuring out how to work with, but we are just going to go ahead and use what we've got, and that is the sidereal. That is the sidereal. That is the sidereal sign system and the whole sign house system. But when we get to the vernal equinox, sidereally, the sun is actually in the sign of Pisces. Sidereally, the sun is actually in the sign of Pisces, and it is there experiencing, sidereally the sun is actually in the sign of Pisces, and it is there experiencing a major stellium with Neptune, as well as Vertex, which it is experiencing a conjunction with at 5 degrees, Mercury at 9 degrees, which is also Mercury at 9 degrees, Chiron at 20 degrees, and Jupiter at 22 degrees. So there is an applying conjunction going on here with Vertex and the Sun to Mercury. Actually, I believe that that is a separating conjunction because Mercury has already passed the point of conjunction, and Chiron and Jupiter are experiencing, I believe, an applying conjunction because Chiron is getting closer to Jupiter at 22 degrees. So there's a major stellium going on here with 5 placements in the sign of Pisces in the 6th house. Pisces is about the pure waters. Piscean waters are 12th dimensional Christ consciousness waters. It is unconditional love. It is unconditional integrity. And unconditional integrity is what brings structure and order to the natural flux and flow of unconditional love, which is associated with the water. That is the divine feminine principle, and in unconditional integrity is the divine masculine. And these are unconditional, so they are infinite and they are divine. In this way, as they come together, and as we embody more and more these principles of divinity for life in this realm on Earth, because, you know, Earthlings up until this point, and this is the esoteric reading instead of this is the esoteric reading and not the practical advice reading, so this is where we're going to get into the deep stuff. Up until this point, the 12th dimension was the only dimension that was accessible by human beings, and that happened because of the wave of Christ conscious activators that came here 2,000 years ago, and these ascended masters and what we might refer to, and these ascended masters activated that 12th dimensional consciousness on Earth that has allowed us to rise into a new consciousness that we are actively experiencing. The nexus point that we are at right now, because as you can see at 0 degrees, which is also 360 degrees, that is a crossroads. So we're at a crossroads here, and we're always at a crossroads in our own personal lives. At any point along the wheel of time, we are at a crossroads, but because we have gotten back to the start, we are at a crossroads where we can either go around the circle one more time, and that is the same level, the same lessons, only you are probably tired of learning those lessons, or you can choose to ascend, to expand and ascend into higher realms of consciousness. And so what that may look like, and what I think about it is a spiral. And it's important to remember that this is also a double helix. So this is a double helix connecting the divine masculine principles and the divine feminine principles. And at any given time, we are either on either side of the polarity. And honestly, the sweet spot, the place that you want to be, is in the center, because that's where we experience the least resistance. But as I said, if we think about it like this, from the top or the bottom perspective, looking down, it looks like a circle, but it's actually a spiral. And we know that the universe is said quantum physically to actually be shaped like a lens. And so you're looking at this and it looks like an infinity sign, right? You're looking at this and it looks like an infinity sign. But actually, when we see it as time is meant to be seen, it's actually a lens. This is the bottom side of that lens. So it's a concave circle. And that's actually what we use in microscopes. To be able to use a microscope or a telescope, you use a convex lens. It's also in our eyes. That makes it able to be able to see. But so time, or the physical universe, is said quantum physically to be shaped like this. But once again, as I said, it is this infinity sign. But as I said, so this lens, from the outside looking in, it is shaped like this. But of course, as I said, from the top or bottom, it looks like this. And there are parts that we can't necessarily see. If you notice, it goes up and it goes down, and then it goes up again and it goes down and it goes up again. Okay? But also from the side, it looks like this, because we are not actually standing still, always going around that same circle of time. We are actually spiraling upwards or downwards. We are either ascending or we are descending. And it really just depends on what direction you are going in. And, you know, spiraling up or down is very binary, actually. And I do want to say that we can spiral in absolutely in any direction, because this space, though here this way, in this way, it may look like, you know, maybe it's empty. It's actually completely full. The lens is completely full. So when we think about this circle of time, we think about it as if it is empty often, I feel. And the reality is that the known universe is full. From above the fourth dimension, when we have transcended time, the universe is full when we look down at it. But in time, because at some point in time, every point in the universe will be filled. But when we are in the 3D and we are not transcendent of the fourth dimension, which is time, the fourth dimension of time, the fourth temporal dimension, we don't understand that there are always timelines that are available to us. There are always timelines. Oops. There are always timelines that are available to us. It's just a matter of getting there. So understanding that at some point in time, this is a lot of string theory, but at some point in time, I am living my dream life. And I want to get to that point in time. That's a parallel universe to the one that I'm living in right now, but it is accessible to me. I have to just get there, and that's when we're doing quantum leaps and quantum timeline jumping. So scientists do not understand dark matter. We understand matter. We don't really understand dark matter. And that is what the universe is full of. I believe that it's full of potential energy that hasn't been activated yet and is just waiting to be activated. This brings us back to the fact that we are engaging with the energy of new beginnings, Aryan energy in tropical astrology. But it's new beginnings because we are using the wheel of time, and this is the vernal equinox. That's the crossroads that we are at, as I said, here at 0 degrees and at 360. So we are being given the opportunity to cross over and just think of it like this. Think of it as this. Each string that we are on, each timeline that we are on, is full of potential energy, and it exists within the potential energy. This is what the mastery of the 4D allows us to do. It allows us to level up or down, depending. You know what I mean? If at a certain point in time, we are here. And we get here. This is the crossroads, right? This is the space in which this dimension, dimension A, intersects with this dimension, dimension B. And this in-between time, this in-between space, this liminal space between fixed experiences, which don't really exist, but for the sake of linearity, that we're going to say that it does. This in-between space is the quantum jump, the quantum leap. When we get here, we can choose to jump up to A, or we can choose to regress down to C. I mean, from A to B, or we can choose to regress to C, dimension C, and have to learn those old lessons over again. And what a lot of people do, actually, what is most common, I feel, is that people just continue to go around A over and over and over again. And it becomes exhausting, it becomes tiring to your higher dimensional consciousness, which your essential self, your spirit, is that infinitely omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent self. And this is the omnipresence. And we are a point of consciousness within that. When we choose to activate ourselves in another timeline, we direct our consciousness to that timeline, and we are quantumly transported to another timeline. And eventually it will manifest. So at this point in dimension A, we decided that we want to be at this point in dimension B. We have already attached ourselves to that consciousness, to that frame of mind. The consciousness, when we've already decided, okay, I'm going to be my higher self that already exists in dimension B, we avail ourselves of the information necessary to carry us to dimension B, that point in time. And then we start to get clarification around how to get there. And when we start to show up as that version of ourselves, when we get to the crossroads, and as I said, every point in time is a crossroads. Every point is a crossroads, is when we make a decision. When we get to that crossroads, that turning point, that through the looking glass moment, 0 degrees or 360 degrees. When we cross over at this point here, we are going to cross over and go up and come out the other side. And eventually we get here because we have consciously been showing up for it. It is about being in energetic alignment, because you can't just think like, okay, I'm going to do it. Like, yeah, that helps, but that is like just the beginning stages. If we dedicate our full selves as much as we possibly can, because as I said, we do have that whole 95% that is the subconscious mind. If we dedicate as much of ourselves as we possibly can, we tip the scales in our favor and the energy in our favor, and in favor of this higher self that we've been showing up as. And that has transformed our energy so that we are in energetic alignment with this, so we can transition into that. But if we're just here saying, okay, I'm ready, I want this, I want this, I want this, but we're not actually showing up and we're not actually embodying the energy of that thing, we're not going to cross over into that point. We're going to have to go around again because we haven't actually learned the lessons that we need to learn karmically. And I want to also remind that this is a very linear, very, honestly, I even say two-dimensional understanding of all of this. Because, as I said, at any given point, we are always, always, always. You know, I made it look like, okay, we're inside. It's full on the inside, but it's actually, it's everywhere. The inside and the outside. We are always existing in it. It's just what our point of consciousness is able to comprehend as a 3D incarnated being. So this is always happening in all directions, in all parts of our lives. This is always happening. And in certain parts of our lives, we're going to have to go around the circle a few more times before we ascend in that part of our lives to this higher level of consciousness, this higher level of existence. But if your consciousness has ascended, everything has to follow suit. So some things will be taken away by virtue of this higher consciousness. There's nothing that you can do about that. And that's what's been happening in the 3D and in the ethers as we enter new earth consciousness, because the earth has leveled up in its own planetary consciousness. And as we are beings that have been created from the earth, we are also leveling up in our own consciousness. And that's why I said the 12th dimensional consciousness, you know, beings incarnated on this planet as earthlings, as human beings with 12th dimensional consciousness a couple thousand years ago, in order to level up the planetary consciousness and the humanoid consciousness, because humans are expressions of higher levels of consciousness for this planet. We are just expressions of this planet. However, of course, we know that this planet chose to host spirits from other planets, and they have shifted the consciousness, and we're in an alchemizing space, in an alchemizing point where we are working to harmonize those energies in that gene pool, if you will, of consciousness. Because it has been a fragmented, fractious, unharmonious or disharmonious fracas, if you will, when it is supposed to be a beautiful song. And so we have been training that consciousness and the energy of those beings that arrived here, those consciousness from planets that were destroyed, so that they may be able to harmonize and attune to, not only to this planet's consciousness, but alongside the leveling up and the expansion of consciousness on this planet. So as we expand, because that's the thing, is like, it's not like we are, as I said, it's not like we are only ever ascending upwards or even only ever ascending downwards. We are expanding in all You're expanding in all directions. And you notice I'm making a spiral. Okay? And at any point in time, we may be conscious here, here, here. Because the thing of it is, if we're able to exist, this is perfect. It's a circle, it's balanced and even in all of the spaces. But that's usually not how it is. And that's when it's harmonious. Usually how it is oop, that is too big. And this is the same area as the white circle. And you'll notice it's like, oh, that's really great, I'm way out here, but no, it's not actually. Because it's not balanced. And the point is that we need to get balanced. So what happens is we have to do the shadow work. And the shadow work cools this energy down so that it can come back to center and it can be directed. Oops. Cools this energy down, cools this energy down, so that it can all be redirected to fill in the blanks. So that's our primal energy, that's divine sacred energy, consciousness coming in and combining with our primary energy in order to bring us back and bring us into balance. So that we're just taking up that space. Okay, so that's also what receiving the downloads is meant to help us do. The full process is not being enacted if we're just receiving the downloads, but we're not processing them and embodying them. The embodiment transforms this energy. In fact, I'm going to get rid of the purple. I'm going to go back to blue because we're going to go back. The embodiment brings this divine energy in a balanced way, but parts of it haven't gotten that. And so processing is going to reel all of this back in. And get it into alignment and get it into balance so that eventually, hopefully, we're just this. And when we're this is the portal through which we ascend. This is the crown chakra. So you understand, sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's red. Because really we're talking about feminine and we're talking about yin and yang energy. And whatever you need is whatever you will receive. And whatever you receive needs to be balanced out by you. That's the processing and the embodiment. That's how you transform your DNA. And you transform the DNA of the planet and all of its organic inhabitants. Organic meaning that they come from the earth. They are made by the earth. We receive these downloads through the crown chakra and we process them through our body and bring it all into balance. And then as we do that, our world around us is brought into harmony and is transformed. That's what has been going on. That's the process that we have been going through. And as I said, at any given point in time, you know, we may be having to do this work here, and this work here, but then there may be a lot of us that is centered. Healing is non-linear. All of this is non-linear. That's really important to understand. That's really important to understand, because now that there's an understanding of quantum physically and esoterically what is going on, we can get into how we use this as alchemists, as natural born manifestors. Okay, we covered a lot, and I just want to wrap up what we've talked about in order to move on to the divination aspect of things. Right now, we are at the nexus point. We are about to go through the looking glass that we went through a couple of years ago. We're coming to the end of a cycle. And it's not just about making the decision, oh, this is how I'm going to show up today or on the day of the solstice, the equinox. It was about making that decision this whole time and doing the work, putting in the actions, putting the effort and the energy into creating this new reality for yourself, investing the energy into creating this reality for yourself. And so what's happening now is, you know, we've gotten the 12-dimensional energy, that's unconditional love and unconditional integrity. And we want to be in between those things so it's balanced. There is a balancing that has been going on, and that balancing has been preparing us to ascend to the next level. Not everybody's going to be able to, but there are beings incarnate now but the collective is leveling up now, and there's no stopping that. Consciousness is evolving higher, and there's no stopping that. That's the collapse of those old veils of the demonic shadow empire that have been keeping folks low vibrational, low density, and lower dimensional, trapped in the same karmic cycles that allow them to be fed on and keep them stuck in 2D, the second dimension, which is hell for a 3-dimensional being. Living beneath yourself, living below yourself, living below your consciousness. It's hell. And that's why so many people have been living in hell. And that's why the earth has been co-opted as this kind of hell realm. And it's not that. It's not that. It is a divine, sacred, celestial being. And it is going through a consciousness awakening, a spiritual cleansing that is allowing it to be freed from all of the spell work that has been done to keep us low vibrational and to keep us imprisoned, because the earth is a feminine being. The earth is a feminine being. And that is why femininity has been demonized. And it's time, in this time, it's being liberated. Go and watch what's happening in the ethers and how it's manifesting in the 3D video series that I started and in the 2023, and watch the Earth and Our Bodies episodes. It's a 2-part episode. Watch that and you will understand. You'll understand what I mean when I say this. These spells, all of this stuff, these veils, these control programs that have been implemented inside of us are collapsing. It's just like at Y2K when the code was written for the fact that they were in the 90s and they didn't know what was going to happen in the new millennium when it went to 2000. And it was called the Y2K problem. And some people thought it was going to be the end of the world, but also they thought that the computer systems were going to collapse. And there actually were issues with the computer systems where they had to be updated and restored and changed. And it's kind of like when we have iOS systems or whatever, and we need to update the operating system on our phone or on our computer. And certain programs will not run on our phone or on our computer because our phone or computer's operating system is not updated, or because the program itself isn't compatible with the updated operating system. So what's happening is the updated operating system has been coming online, and a bunch of the old programs are no longer able to operate with this operating system. They're not compatible anymore, so they cannot be used. Just like Flash can no longer be used specifically on Mac iOS operating system, and so you can't play Neopets anymore. You can't play Flash games anymore. But that ruled the internet at a certain time period. We're moving away from the Neopets, unfortunately. But figuratively, these old operating systems and programs that have been implemented upon us through, through genetic manipulation, and the inheritance of trauma, that sort of thing, but also really through indoctrination and learned behavior. We are purging that collectively, and that's why we see it happening collectively, where there's this revolution of mental health and illness, revolution of health in general, revolution of emotional health, physical health, taking care of ourselves, class consciousness. These things are on the rise because the expansion is breaking past the confines that were not allowing us to expand and essentially to ascend. And we were not able to go deep enough, so there is a descension going on too. There are memories that have been hidden from us. A lack of understanding of the past creates a fraught future, and those things are being synthesized now. They're coming into balance now, so that we may be able to transcend and move forward into the future without that heavy density anymore. This is part of why there's so much unnecessary metals in our deodorant, for instance, and in our water system, these sorts of things, to get these heavy densities, these dense metals that are not supposed to be in our body into our body, but the actual minerals that we need, magnesium, iron, things like that, those are not present, and we don't get enough of those things, and so our biochemicals are all fucked up. You know what I mean? So This is super important foundationally to understand as we start this new cycle of our being as earth integrated beings. We are reintegrating into the earth because our collective social programming has taken us away from it. We're reintegrating into the earth now, for us to be able to have smoother sailing for this. And if you've been doing the work all this time, this is going to make this transition so much easier. But we're going to be seeing a lot of externalized collapse because, as I said, the programs have been collapsing, the timelines have been collapsing in our DNA as we've been experiencing this healing, as we've been experiencing this transformation. Because the timelines, look, exactly what I've been saying, the timelines are encoded in our DNA. So we know that trauma transforms our DNA in the moment, and the inheritance of epigenetic trauma sends us spiraling, it sends us fractal, spiraling in a certain direction, and quantum physics say we're going to continue infinitely in that direction until there is a greater stopping force. So many of us have been being born chain breakers, breakers of the wheel, breakers of those patterns. Break that by having that stopping force. It's not enough to stop the force, though. We have to send it in another direction. What direction are we going to send it in? That's what we're talking about. That's what we're figuring out. We're figuring out what direction to send it in. And this is about lifestyle. So we're going to get into that in the next part of the video, and I'm going to bring in the chart, but I wanted to get first this understanding of the esoteric principles before we get into that. So I hope that that was clear. I hope that that was helpful, and I will see you shortly.